So today is my 43rd birthday, and I thought for a video I wanted to make a video where I talked about things that I would tell my younger self. If I could, give advice to my younger self, like when I was 21 or, maybe 18 or just starting off in life or something. 43 is it's not really that old. I mean, it's middle-aged. You're not old enough to where you're considered an elder or anything. It's not like you've accumulated all this wisdom or something at 43. But what I find is unique about middle-aged is that, like, you're old enough to kind of understand the way the world works to a large degree, but you're still young enough for the most part to be able to make changes and to be able to pivot in life still and go in another direction. Those opportunities are still there. You still have time to make changes and do other things that you may need to do in life, make adjustments and so forth. And that gets harder to do as you get older. I mean, you can always make a change in life, but it definitely gets older. It definitely gets harder as you get older. And so I thought, let me make this video where if I could give advice to my younger self. And I guess the first thing I would do, if I could talk to my younger self, the very first thing I would say is to be more focused about what it is you want to do in life when it comes to career or work, or anything really, like where you want to go to college, what you want to study. Some of the mistakes I made when I was younger was not focusing on any one particular thing when I was in college, or not focusing on a particular career path or anything, and instead kind of allowing myself to go from one thing to the next based on whatever came up or based on what was available, without being more focused and driven about it. And this is kind of a big deal because when you're younger, you have a lot more energy, and that's a part of life where you can start to really build momentum in something. If you really focus on a particular field or an industry or a particular job or something that you care about, that time of life when you're younger is when you can build a lot of momentum and go a lot further if you get started when you're younger. It's much harder to start over and do stuff when you're in your 30s or 40s. Now, I mean, I'm doing okay now. I pivoted in life a long time ago, when I was in my late 20s and early 30s and so forth. And so I've made great strides since then, and I've done pretty well for myself. I mean, I'm headed for early retirement, basically, the whole 9 yards and everything. But I had to make a lot of changes to get to this point. I had to make some sacrifices to get here. It's much easier, and you'll go much further if you really bear down and focus, like in your late teens or early 20s. So I would say being more focused and time conscious, and picking one path or one industry that you can work on and that you can master, and then later on you can always go on to other things, or you can kind of segue from one field onto another if you choose. But you're far better off focusing on something in particular early on, especially something that will pay really well, that will translate into strong job opportunities and strong opportunities in an industry, whatever that may be. So just being more focused on that. Like when I was younger, I worked in the printing industry for about 10 years off and on, from about age 17 until I was about 29. And the printing industry, this was during the late 90s and the early 2000s. During that period, the printing industry was undergoing a lot of change because of the internet, of course, and it was being digitized. So a lot of like magazines and periodicals and things like that were going online. Everything was going digital, and so like print was becoming less and less needed over time. And so a lot of printing shops and so forth were either going out of business or being bought up, or were consolidating, and being bought up by larger competitors. You needed fewer people to do the job. Like I remember back in '99, you go into like a medium-sized print shop that printed like city newspapers and periodicals, and like those magazines you see at the end of the supermarket, advertising cars and stuff like that. I mean, you would need like a dozen people in a pre-press room, and everything, and by like the mid 2000s you really only needed like 2 people. So the whole industry was undergoing consolidation and shrinking and laying people off, and obviously wages went down. But that was an industry I got stuck in for basically from '99 through 2012, for the most part. And I have some fond memories working in it, but it was a shrinking, dying industry, and it was not something to waste any time in, really, especially if you were young. I mean, the people who were in that industry were largely older and everything, and they were kind of stuck in it, but I was in my teens and early 20s, and it's just something I did to get myself through college at the time. But I probably should have moved on from that a lot sooner, rather than sticking around in it like I did. Another piece of advice, and this kind of fits in with the focus and the job advice I gave previously, is that if it's not working in a company or in an industry or a business or a place that you're at, whatever it is, if it's not working for you, if you're not making money, if you're not progressing, if all you're doing is just kind of barely keeping your head above water, and you're not able to move up and you're not able to progress really, or if the chemistry there is bad, just move on. Figure out a way to move on, and don't waste any more time there than you need to. This is easier said than done, of course, because obviously we need to work, we need to make money. It's not always an option for everybody. I understand that, and I've been there myself. I've been there myself a number of times. But it's not worth wasting more than like a few months, and certainly not years at a place, if you're not making any real progress there. Okay, figure out a way to go into something else, whether that requires getting more education, getting a certification, networking, whatever it's going to take. I mean, even if you have to go to like trade shows, or you go to any venue you possibly can, and talk to other people and try to network. If you have to go that route, go that route. Don't just rely on looking for jobs online, going to Indeed or something like that, or whatever. I mean, reach out to other people, make moves. Don't allow yourself to sink and fall behind, and think that you're powerless in moving on to another industry or into another field where you can do better. Don't just rely on online job queries, or sending your resume out through random emails, or filling out stuff online, like going to company websites. Don't just sit at your computer and think that it's all going to work out. I mean, you have to go out there and really make moves, and look for things, and look for opportunities. It's like gold prospecting or something back in the 1840s and in California. You had to go out there and like physically look and really make the effort. And I think a lot of young people, and I count myself in this category back then, we're just too reliant on the internet. We just want to sit there and email resumes and then cry and complain that nobody responds. And yes, that sucks, don't get me wrong, but you have to do a lot more legwork. We're talking about having a career, having something that's going to like make you real money, and allow you opportunities in life. If you really want that, you have to get out and kind of work for it. It's like anything else in life. It's not all going to come to you just because you send resumes out through an email or something. But to go back to my point, I wasted far too much time in jobs and in companies that I hated, working for people I hated, working for people who didn't have my interest at heart. And not because there's anything wrong with them. It's just because they had their own interest. And they didn't care about me. They didn't care about my career. They only cared about themselves. I mean, you have to understand that that's how most people are out in the real world that you're going to be working with. And there's nothing bad about that per se. It's not that it's not that those people are evil or something like that. That's just how it is. You really have to advocate for yourself and look out for yourself more. But don't waste time at companies or with people or at places that are not working out for you, for whatever reason. Go out and find the companies and the opportunities that are going to be right for you, that are going to allow you to grow and be successful in whatever way, in whatever that defines itself for you, whatever that form of success is, whether it's money, which is the most obvious form of success, or it could be recognition or helping others, whatever it is. You're not powerless. You're not incapable. You're able to go out and make those changes. Don't think because you're stuck in a job or you're in an industry that's it, it's over. I mean, especially if you're under 30 or under 25 or something. I mean, you have a lot of time ahead of you to make those changes and to pivot. So, that would be my second piece of advice. My third is more general. It's more like it's more of like a financial piece of advice to be more conscientious of to invest more. I mean, I look back and I wish that I had spent more time investing my money. I mean, granted, I didn't really have a lot up until I was maybe in my early 30s. I really didn't make much anyway. But all the same, I wish that I had invested more of my money when I could invest it, and that I had just allowed it to stay there, because compound interest is a phenomenal thing, and it's a lot easier to invest when you're younger, even if you don't have as much money to invest, than it is later, and try to catch up. Now I've since caught up a lot. I mean, I've made some really great strides and everything. I'm not quite where I would like to be, but I am further ahead than where I thought I would be at this age. And I've come a long way at this point, and so I'm happy about that. But there's no doubt that had I started investing when I was younger, I would be way further ahead than I am now. I'll give you a little story. It's like years and years ago, back in I want to say 2004 or 2005, I started buying shares in Apple. Not because I'd done any serious research into it, but more because I could look at the headlines and I could see, oh, this company's making a lot of moves. They're always innovating. They're always doing things. This should be a company to buy into. And I didn't buy that many shares. I want to say from 2004 to 2005, I think maybe I bought 13 shares at a cost of I'm going to say maybe $60, $70, or $80 a share. Maybe not even that much. It might have been as low as 40. Now, this was before Apple split multiple times, which it's done over the last 20 or so years. I want to say it's split maybe 3 times in the last 20 years or so. So whatever the price was that I bought it, let's say it was $40 or $50, that's pre multiple splits. So I'm not sure what that would exactly translate to into today, but the long story short is those 13 shares today would be worth maybe around 10,000 or so. After the splits and with dividends reinvested, it would be worth around 10,000. Now I sold those shares in, I want to say 05 or 06 or something like that. I needed the money, and so I sold them, and I made money on it. I made maybe a 50% return or something on those shares, and I made a few thousand or whatever it was. But had I held on to them, I mean, they'd be worth maybe 10,000 or more today. Now 10,000 is not a lot of money, of course, but that's not really the point. The point is that you will have opportunities to invest and to make money that you may not realize are opportunities until much later. And you'll not realize that you missed out on something until years and years later. And, for me, that example, was Apple. And, even though it was only $10,000, it's, I missed out on those returns. I mean, imagine if I had bought a couple $1,000s worth of Apple back then. It would be worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands today if I held. And, who knows, I could retire early or whatever. But, most people, are not going to hold on that long. I mean, obviously, I'm looking at this through, 2020 vision, in a very idealistic type way, like had you held for that 20 years, which most people are not going to do. But my point is that, you will have opportunities in investing. They will be there, and don't miss out on them. Don't be so quick to ignore something or to sell an opportunity, an investment you might have made, just because you need the money. If you can, get a second job or figure out a way, to hold on to your investment without having to sell it, try to do that. I mean, this is assuming you have a good investment. I mean, I'm not talking about some latest meme coin or something like that, but like a real investment. Looking back over the past 20 years, Apple, let's just go through it. Like, Apple has gone up like, what, 5,000%? If you bought $10,000 worth of Apple back in 2004 or 2005, it would be worth, what, $500,000 today? As of today, gold is at an all-time high. Literally, as I'm making this video, gold is at an all-time high of like 3,335 or 3,340, like in that range. I remember when gold was in the 200s in the early 2000s. I want to say 2000, 2001. When I was 18 and 19 years old, gold was like 200, 300. And it kind of stayed there for a while, and it started to go up to like 300, 400 in the late 2000s. And then, of course, after the 2008 crash, when the Federal Reserve started doing all that quantitative easing and money printing and everything, gold started to really go up. And it kind of leveled off at around 15, 16, 17 or so, like 10 years ago. And then COVID happened, and now gold has started to go up a lot, and now it's going parabolic. It went from, gold was like 2,000, not even like what, a year ago or something, and now it's going on $3,400. So just in my adult life, from 18 till 43, I've seen gold go from 260, 270 an ounce to, on its way to 3,400. That's more than a 10x in gold. I've seen Apple go up, 5,000%. I've seen companies like Amazon and Facebook and, Microsoft and Tesla and all these other companies that have gone up like multiple times, 10, 15, 20, 30x. Some of them doing it in just a matter of a few years. The S&P 500 has gone up like 4 times since the year 2000. The NASDAQ has gone up like 6 or 7 times. And then, of course, the asset that's returned the highest is Bitcoin, which has gone up like thousands and thousands of percent, obviously, since its inception. But even if you'd got in like really kind of late, like let's say in 2019 or 2020, I started buying it in 2020 myself when it was still under $10,000. And now it's around 85 as of today. It's around like 84, 85, and it was recently at 108. So even if you'd bought in 5-6 years ago when it was like 3,500 to 10,000 or so, you would have made 10, 11, 12 times your money in that relatively short period of time. And my point with all of this is that over the next 20 years, you're going to see the same types of returns in all kinds of assets. I'm not saying you'll see the same returns in the ones I just mentioned. You probably won't see those kind of returns for Apple or Bitcoin again, but there are plenty of other assets out there that will return really high value like that over that 20-year period. you have to ask yourself, like, when you're 20 and 21, like, where do you want to be in your 40s, in your early and mid 40s? Do you want to be like on your way to early retirement, or do you want to be stuck in a job knowing you're never going to get out, or you may have to work until your 60s? That's something to ask yourself. And there, it's not that difficult to prepare. If you just invest a little bit and just put it to the side and forget about it and hold on to it no matter what, you'll see really high returns over those years, and you'll thank yourself later. I mean, you'll be one of those so-called lucky people, who gets to retire early, although it really isn't luck. It's called preparation and everything. I mean, I didn't start to seriously invest until like my early 30s. And again, like I said, it's largely because I didn't have a lot of money to invest beforehand. But I didn't really get like knowledgeable and start to research and listen to finance podcasts and read finance articles and stuff like that until I was in my early 30s. And I've done pretty well. I expect to retire probably before I'm 50, if not even sooner, based on where I'm going and everything. But I could have gotten here a lot sooner, had I started earlier. So, focusing on a financial education in life is really, really important. In addition to choosing which job you want to be in, and just choosing to focus on one direction in life, or on a specific area that you want to focus on. All of that stuff is really important. And I guess my fourth piece of advice would be not to worry so much about college. College, especially nowadays, but I think this was true even 25 years ago. I don't know how much of a value it really is anymore, unless you're going for something that you need for a professional degree or an advanced degree that's going to translate into a real job. I mean, if you're going to become a doctor, if you want to be a lawyer, although there's plenty of lawyers out there, an engineer, some type of, like a scientist or something where you really need the education, it's one thing. But, and this is especially true nowadays with the internet and YouTube and everything, that most of what you see in college in the liberal arts, you can teach yourself by going to the library or watching YouTube. You can even teach yourself a lot of technical things, whether it's software development or video editing or anything, just about, off of, going to places like Udemy or like YouTube tutorials, going on like Google Scholar and looking up, research articles and so forth. If you're going to college, make sure you're going for something that's specific, that you know what you're going to do, and that you have a plan. If you must take out loans, it should only be for something that's going to translate into a real job and a real career. This is, I don't know how much of a hot take this really is, but one of the cold hard truths is there are real jobs and there are fake jobs, and the fake jobs you would almost just call gigs. And I'm not trying to demean anybody who works and has a job and needs to make money. I've been there myself. I've done all kinds of jobs myself. But like a real job is like you're a doctor. Okay, you're an engineer. Like, you have a real set of skills, and it probably doesn't matter what happens in the economy. You're going to be fine. You're going to be able to go out and have an income and continue working and making money. And then there are fake jobs. There are jobs that are not really jobs. They're gigs. And they're jobs that probably only exist because the real jobs need them in some way. Like, this is like a lot of like your retail jobs and service worker and stuff like that. And what I mean by it's not a real job, what I mean is you're easily replaceable. Okay? And when you're young, and so when you're young and you're considering, what should I do, don't so much think about it in terms of like, oh, is this my passion, or do I care about this, or oh, am I interested in this? No, think about it in terms of like, is this a real job or is this a fake job? Is this degree going to lead me to a real job or a fake job that can be easily outsourced, or it can be easily automated, or you're easily replaceable, versus a job where you're kind of indispensable. I'm not saying, don't go to college unless you want to be a brain surgeon or something like that, or something really, really niche and highly specialized. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is you have to really look at college as an investment, and you have to look at it critically. And you have to look at it like, is this something worth getting into debt, potentially tens of thousands of dollars? And if all you're doing is going and studying, Danish literature or something like that, well, I got news for you. You can go on Google Scholar and look up Danish literature all you want. You can go to the local library and do that. You can go on, there's any number of websites that discuss Danish literature. You don't need to take out a $40,000-$50,000 loan to go to a college just to study Danish literature or something like that. Because, what are you really going to get with that? You're going to be, what, a professor of Danish literature? Exactly. It's not really something that's worth pursuing and spending tens of thousands of dollars at. One of my biggest mistakes in life was going to a private college that at the time was ranked, well, I guess it was maybe ranked in the top 100. I mean, for whatever that's worth. When I really didn't need to. And I wound up taking on tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt that I was not able to repay. And I didn't even finish my degree. And it was a degree. First it started off, it was political science, and then it was this, and it was that. And I wound up only going for a year, and I came out tens of thousands of dollars in debt. And it was a complete waste of time. And it's one of the biggest mistakes I've made. And you would think getting into that college, it was a top-ranked private school. You would have thought, oh, what a great accomplishment. And in retrospect, it was like a disaster. It was a complete waste of time and money. And to say that it destroyed my life would kind of almost be like an understatement, because the amount of debt it left me in made it almost impossible for me to have any excess income to save or to invest. And then when I wound up working, and I was working in the printing company at the time with all this debt, I could barely pay it back. And then eventually my wages were garnished because I couldn't make the payments, and I lost something like a quarter of my income that was being taken out by the government to go back to repay the loan. So it was absolutely catastrophic financially for my life. And that stuff affects you psychologically. It affects you emotionally. It's a very demoralizing thing to work a job and even work overtime and make. I mean, I wasn't making decent money, but I was making okay money for myself at the time, and to still be falling behind like I was. That's a very demoralizing thing. So when you're going to college, when you're thinking about going, you really have to think about the costs and the debt that you're taking on, and decide for yourself whether that's something that you want to do and whether it's worth it. And I hate to say it, college is not worth it for most people. I'm sorry, it isn't. I say that as someone who, I went back later in life in college. I was in my mid-30s, actually. I went back and I finished my bachelor's degree in English. I did it largely just because I wanted to finish the degree. I wanted that monkey off my back, so to speak. I had all these credits, and I just wanted it done just so I could say that it was done and I could get my degree and move on, because it was kind of holding me back psychologically, and it had always bothered me that I hadn't finished. But when I went back in my early 30s, I paid cash. I didn't take out any debt for it. I just went back and I cash flowed the whole thing, and I finished in 2 years, and I moved on. And for me, the psychological benefits of finishing it were good for me at the time. But other than taking time out of working a full-time job at the time, it didn't really cost me anything. It's not something I had to do, but it was something that I like needed to do, kind of, to move on psychologically, and I'm glad that I did it. So I'm not saying college is all bad, and I'm not saying all liberal arts college is bad, having gone through that myself and gotten that degree. But let's be serious here. Let's be honest and be critical about what we're doing. And let's be careful about making commitments like that in life that are going to affect you for a long time. Student debt is almost like getting married. Having a high amount of student loan debt, it's like getting married to a bad partner. And that can ruin you, as many people will attest. So that would be my fourth piece of advice. Being very critical and careful about where you go to college and deciding whether you need it, and whether it's right for you. And it's not right for everybody. And I think society needs to get away from, encouraging people to go to college no matter what. I mean, it isn't the best thing for everybody. So anyway, I think, what was that, number 4? So number 5, I think, is I would try to focus more on finding a life partner, or finding someone that you care about, and maybe focusing on trying to get married when you're younger. Now, I'm somebody that for whom, like, marriage and personal relationships were never like a big deal for me as an adult. It's just never been that big of a deal for me. Like, I've dated, and yes, I've had relationships and so forth in the past. But for whatever reason, for me, it was just never a big priority. I never, I was never like out there every night at the bars or the clubs. It was just never a big deal for me. It never mattered that much to me, the way it does maybe for a lot of other men or women too, who care about those things. I don't know why that is. It's just how I am. But it's like I see a lot of headlines and I read a lot of articles today about, young people who are remaining single, longer, into their mid-20s, late 20s and 30s and beyond. They're delaying having children, marriage and family and everything. And I think that's really sad, and the common refrain that I see from a lot of people is that they want to prioritize their careers. Oh, my career, my this, my that. And yes, having a career and everything is important. I mean, that's great, but I mean, it's not the thing you're going to be thinking about, or that you're going to care about when you get older. When you're in the rest home, you're not going to be thinking about all the OT you put in at the factory. You're not going to be thinking about all the Excel spreadsheets that you made, because the boss wanted the report by Monday. Like, you're going to be thinking about the relationships that you had or that you didn't have, the relationships that you made in your life, and the opportunities that you took or didn't take. And if there's one thing, I mean, I really wish that, society would encourage young people to focus on, marriage, or, getting together with someone and taking that stuff more seriously when they're younger and when they're in their prime years, meaning ages 18 to 24. I know that sounds really young by Western standards, because most people get married at age 30 now, and sometimes even older, and maybe they have 1 or 2 kids. But the fact is, it's so much easier. It's generally a lot easier to meet people when you're younger, just because you might be in college, or you make friends in high school, and maybe you still associate with them or something as you turn 18 and 19 and get older, and keep those friends in your life. It's harder to make friends and to have that social circle the older you get. You don't want to have to be starting over, when you're 25 and 30 or whatever, with a whole new group of friends, and have to start dating and everything. It's like I always see these headlines, on Medium and other places, of middle-aged people and women and men in their 30s complaining about dating. Oh, dating sucks today. I can't stand going on dating apps. Dating sucks today. And I sit there and I read these headlines and these articles, and I think to myself, well, yeah, of course it sucks. because, you know, you're not supposed to really be dating in your 30s and beyond. That's not normal. You know, that's not really a normal thing. You know, like historically, most people got married and had families and children when they were much younger, like, you know, 18 to 24, sometimes younger, sometimes a little bit older. You know, but when I go on and I see these articles, you know, 35-year-old women, oh, the dating market sucks, where are all the good men? Well, I'll tell you where all the good men are. They're all married. You know, they're the dads you see in those suburban houses on the weekend barbecuing and watching football with their 2 and 3 kids. Most of the so-called good men are off the market. And the same probably goes for a lot of the women too. A lot of them are off the market. You know, and so that's the cold hard truth of it. You know, so I kind of laugh when I see these articles, you know, of these people bemoaning that. And it's like, well, yeah, of course dating sucks. It's not normal to still be dating and you're 37 and you've never been married or had kids before. Like, that's not like a normal thing. But it is a thing that's very common today. I'm not saying the people who are doing that are abnormal, because, you know, I mean, they're not. That's just how that's how it is with a lot of people now. That's how our society is. You know, love, romance, relationships have been completely deprioritized in favor of, you know, basically punching up TPS reports. And I don't think that's a fair trade-off. You know, I don't think that that's a very good trade-off at all. You know, so if I could give that fifth piece of advice to, you know, my younger self is to try to prioritize that more and, you know, try to focus on that more. It's way easier to meet somebody when you're younger, and it's so much better to be able to go through life with somebody at your side. You know, and again, I know it's not for everybody. I know, you know, everybody's story is different, and, you know, some people do find somebody who's younger and, you know, they have a breakup or they have a partner who passes away. I understand all of that, but I'm talking about the wholesale way in which our society dismisses important things like love and romance and relationships. I think that's really sad. I do. I think it's really sad to see a lot of these young men and women who just kind of float through and end up alone. You know, not because they don't have opportunities, but simply because they ignore them because, oh, I want to focus on my career. I care so much about my career. And it's like, well, you know, here's some reality. The average income in the United States as of today is only like $66,000 a year, you know, or no, I think that might be the median. The average might even be lower. It might be like 48. That's not a lot of money. I mean, that wouldn't even pay for like your average SUV, you know, in a year's worth of work. So you're giving up a really critical and important aspect of life, a partner, a family, children, basically for not even an SUV. That's what you're giving up there. That's not a worthy trade. I mean, you know, 66,000 or 70,000 is just not. It's not that much money. It really isn't. You know, in most major cities, all that would do is just barely qualify you to exist in most major cities. You know, LA, New York, certainly. You know, cities like Houston or Dallas, Miami, Chicago, and you know, Denver and other places like that. I mean, you know, I'm sure you're aware of all the real estate costs out there. You see that. You know, the average home is like what, 450? What's 70,000? And you're throwing away an important part of human nature and need for what, you know, 60,000, 70,000 a year. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just it's not really a good deal there. So, you know, I would tell myself to focus, you know, to maybe, you know, socialize more and reach out more and try to find somebody like that and take that more seriously. You know, when I was younger, but again, I mean, for me, it's never been a big priority for me for whatever reason. I don't know why. I mean, I've had plenty of women that were interested in me. I mean, I've worked at places, and you know, I'd have somebody who was interested, and invariably, I wouldn't be interested in them at all. There was no reciprocity there. I mean, that's kind of the story of my life in many cases. But I've also had good relationships and, and I've dated, some great women that for which there were reciprocal feelings and everything, but for whatever reason it's just not been a huge deal for me, which I mean, I don't know why, but that's just how it is. So that would be advice number 5. And I think number 6, and this might sound a little cliche. I mean, I'm sure there's other videos that will say the same thing, but like I would say, try to spend more time with family and developing relationships with family. Look, I get it. Not everybody loves their family or every one of their family members equally. I understand that. I get it. But, there are going to be members that you get along with, and try to cherish those times that you have with them and those relationships, because they won't always be there. I've had some tragedies in my personal life and my family. I've had family members that died young. Shockingly, in a shocking circumstance that was tragic. They've passed away, and that was very upsetting. And I still think about that person, a lot. And I've had other members that passed away when they were much older, and I still think about them as well. So, it's something just to be mindful of as you get older, to try to cherish those relationships, and take advantage of opportunities when you have them, and take things seriously, when it comes to focusing on your career and who you might want to be partners with. And what you might want to do in your life, because it's a lot easier to do when you're young than when you're older. It's much harder to pivot, as you get older. And I guess if I could offer a last piece of advice, I guess advice number 7, it would be, don't be so afraid about getting older. I mean, like I said at the beginning, middle age is a strange time, because you're old enough to look back and reflect and have a much more mature, knowledgeable outlook on life. And you've been around the block a few times, obviously, at that point, but you're still young enough to pivot and make changes and do better. And so it's not that bad. It's not something to be afraid of. It's just something to be mindful of, and to be aware of your time, and to be aware of the opportunities that you'll be given and that you'll come across, because you will find them. It's very easy to fall into a very cynical, despairing mindset when you're younger, because you think things aren't going your way, or, oh, I can't wait till I'm older and I have more money, I have this and that. And the reality is, there are opportunities that are going to be all around you that you're going to overlook, and you're not going to realize are opportunities until you're much older. So just try to open your eyes more and be more aware of that stuff, because they are out there, and to be more aware of your time and focus your energies on things that matter. I would also try to focus on, I don't want to put it like focus on your passion, but focus on what you are legitimately good at, and then look for a way to monetize that, and to systematize it in such a way that you can make a living and be successful. If you are somebody who's very sociable and you're outgoing, look for a career maybe in sales, or a career where you do public speaking. That's a very high in demand soft skill to have that, frankly, not many people want to do. Most people hate public speaking. If you are, really analytical, and you're quiet, you keep to yourself, you like to research and look stuff up, then look for something that's maybe more scientific or technical, whatever that may be. I mean, if you like to write, like I love to write, writing is really everything for me, and I write mainly fiction, but I also write articles and such. And fiction and writing articles online does not pay that much, but I still do it because I love to do it, and it provides a lot of value for me. But if you just like to write in general, I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can make money writing. You can you can be a technical writer, you can be a copywriter, you can write blogs and articles for hire. You can put an account or put a profile up on like Fiverr and places like that. There's all kinds of ways to monetize something that you're interested in, or something that means a lot to you. So I would just say be more mindful of you know, what it is you're good at, and try to marry that with something that, with a career or an industry that allows you to tap into that passion of yours and make money. You know, whatever that may be, you know. So that would probably be my last piece of advice. And you know, it's something that I wish I'd been able to hear some of this stuff when I was younger, and hopefully anybody who hears it now, assuming they've, you know, sat through this long video, hopefully it provides some value to them. So thanks for listening.